The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aurelian, turning the city lights outside into bleeding watercolors. Vivian Reed pressed her palm against the cool glass for just a moment, watching the drops race downward, each one a tiny escape she would never have. The kitchen bell chimed, sharp, insistent. She jerked away from her brief respite, smoothing down her black apron with trembling fingers. "Table 7 needs water," Derek hissed the words as he shoved past her, balancing a tray of champagne flutes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "And smile, for God's sake. You look like someone died. Someone had died. Her dreams, maybe. Her hope of ever climbing out of the hole she had been born into." But Derek did not care about that, and neither did the glittering crowd of Manhattan's elite who filled Aurelian every Friday night, throwing around money like confetti, while Vivian calculated whether she could afford both groceries and electricity this month. She grabbed the crystal pitcher, heavy, elegant, worth more than everything she owned, and she made her way through the maze of tables. The restaurant hummed with the particular frequency of wealth. Low voices discussing mergers and mistresses, the clink of silverware against bone china, piano drifting from hidden speakers with sophisticated melancholy. She was a ghost here, invisible except when someone needed their $40 sparkling water refreshed. Table 7 sat in the back corner, the table they reserved for guests who valued privacy over being seen. She had been avoiding it all night, letting Tanya handle it. But Tanya had disappeared for her smoke break and left Vivian to face whatever titan of industry lurked back there. The scent hit her first as she approached. Expensive cologne, something dark and woody with notes of bergamot and danger. Not the cloying sweetness most men wore trying too hard to prove something. This was subtle, confident, the kind of scent that whispered rather than shouted. Then she saw him. He sat with his back to the wall, always the wall she would notice later, always positioned to see every entrance, every exit. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like it had been sewn directly onto his body by an Italian tailor who probably charged more for a consultation than Vivian made in a year. His hair was dark, swept back silver, threading through the temples in that way that made men look distinguished instead of old. He could not have been more than 40, but he carried himself with the weight of empires. Two men flanked the table, standing despite the empty chairs. Security. Their eyes never stopped moving, cataloging threats, measuring distances. One spoke into his wrist, a discreet gesture that sent ice down Vivian's spine. She had seen powerful men before. Aurelian catered to them exclusively. But this was different. The air around him seemed compressed, denser, as if gravity itself bent toward him. The other diners gave his table a wide berth without seeming to realize they were doing it, some primal instinct warning them away from an apex predator. Water. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. He did not look up immediately. He was reading something on his phone, and she watched his jaw tighten, a muscle jumping beneath skin that looked like it had been carved from marble. His hands were broad, masculine, with a single platinum ring on his right hand. No wedding band, and she found herself staring at the way his fingers moved across the screen. Controlled, precise. Leave the picture. His voice was smoke and whiskey with the barest hint of an accent she could not place. Italian, maybe. Or something darker from streets where Romance languages learned to curse. She set the pitcher down. Her hands shook just enough that the water rippled. One of the security guards, the one with the scar bisecting his left eyebrow, watched her with dead eyes. And she knew with sudden certainty that he had killed people. Probably recently. She should have left, should have walked away, returned to the safety of the kitchen, stayed invisible like she had learned to be. But her heel caught on something. The chair leg, her own clumsy feet, fate itself. She stumbled forward. The pitcher flew from the table. Time slowed the way it does in nightmares. She watched $40 worth of imported sparkling water arc through the air in a perfect, devastating parabola heading straight for his lap. For that suit that probably cost more than her car. If she had owned a car, she lunged. Her body moved before her brain caught up. Some stupid instinct to fix things, to prevent disaster, to keep the tenuous thread of her employment from snapping. Her hands caught the pitcher mid-flight. Water sloshed over the rim, drenching her uniform instead of his charcoal suit, and she found herself sprawled across the table, chest heaving, soaked through, staring directly into eyes that were the color of a storm rolling over the Atlantic. Gray. Cold. Absolutely lethal. I am so sorry. She gasped, trying to push herself up, but her hand slipped on the wet tablecloth and she crashed forward again, this time colliding with solid muscle and that dangerous cologne that made her head spin. I did not mean to. I am sorry. I am so... His hand caught her wrist. The touch burned. His fingers wrapped around her arm like a brand. Not painful, but absolutely inescapable. And she froze. A rabbit in the shadow of a wolf. Up close, she could see the details she had missed from a distance. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The shadow of stubble along his jaw. The way his pupils dilated as he looked at her. Really looked at her. Vivian was not used to being seen. Her whole life had been about being invisible. The scholarship kid at the fancy school, the waitress in the expensive restaurant, the girl from nowhere trying to survive in a city that ate people like her for breakfast. But he saw her, saw through the dripping hair and soaked uniform and trembling hands to something underneath, something she did not even know was there. "You are wet." He said it, and there was something in his voice that made the observation feel obscene. Yes, I am sorry," she was babbling, trying to pull away, but his grip tightened just a fraction. Not hurting, never hurting, but absolutely preventing escape. "Sullivan," he said it to the scarred guard, not to her, never breaking eye contact. "Get her a towel, and tell Derek his waitress just saved me from an unfortunate dry cleaning bill." He knew Derek's name. Why did he know Derek's name? The guard disappeared, moving with surprising speed for a man his size. And Vivian was left pinned by that gray gaze, by fingers that felt like they were learning the rhythm of her pulse through her skin. "What is your name?" He asked it quietly, conversationally, as if she were not dripping water onto his table, as if his other guard were not watching them with the intensity of a man calculating bullet trajectories. "Vivian." It came out as a whisper. "Vivian Reed." "Vivian." He repeated it, tasted it, and something in her stomach twisted at the way her name sounded in his mouth. "You have quick reflexes, Vivian Reed. I am clumsy." The truth escaped before she could stop it. "I am sorry, I did not mean to. I should go. You should stay." It was not a suggestion. His thumb moved against her wrist, a slow stroke that made her breath catch. "At least until you are dry." Sullivan returned with a towel, plush, white, probably Egyptian cotton. He draped it over her shoulders. His boss released her wrist and she stumbled backward, suddenly cold where his hand had been. She wrapped the towel around herself like armor. "Thank you," she managed, backing toward the kitchen. "I will send someone else to take your order." No, that single syllable stopped her mid-retreat. "You will take my order, Vivian. I would like the lamb, medium rare, and a bottle of the Brunello." The 97, not the 01. She nodded mute and fled. The kitchen was chaos, steam and shouting and the clatter of pans, but she barely registered it. Her wrist burned where he had touched her. Her uniform clung to her skin, cold and uncomfortable. But underneath the discomfort was something else, something that felt dangerously like electricity. "What the hell happened to you?" Tanya grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the staff bathroom. "Derek is losing his mind out there. You dumped water all over Dominic Graves." The name hit Vivian like a physical blow. Dominic Graves. Everyone in New York knew that name. Even people like her who tried to stay as far from the underworld as possible. Shipping magnate, the newspapers called him. Philanthropist. Art collector. But there were other words whispered in kitchens and back alleys. Words like enforcer, made man, and the one that made her blood run cold. Capo. Boss. She had just thrown herself at a mob boss. I did not know. She breathed, leaning against the sink, staring at her reflection in the spotted mirror. Her face was flushed, her hair plastered to her skull, her eyes too wide and frightened. "Tanya, I did not." "Does not matter what you knew." Tanya thrust a dry uniform at her. "Just matters what you do next. Change, fix your face, and for God's sake, do not spill anything else on him." "Men like Dominic Graves do not forget Vivian. They collect debts," Tanya went on, her voice low and urgent in the cramped bathroom. Dominic Graves was not just any crime boss. He was the man who had consolidated the entire Eastern Seaboard's shipping operations under a single organization in less than a decade. The man who had buried his own father and taken the empire before the dirt was dry on the grave. The man who sat in back corners of restaurants and made phone calls that decided whether men lived or died. And right now, Tanya said, jabbing a finger into Vivian's sternum, he is sitting at table 7 in your section, and he knows your name. She changed with shaking hands, listening to those warnings echo. Do not draw attention to yourself again. But it was too late for that. When she returned to table 7 with his lamb perfectly plated, the smell of rosemary and garlic making her empty stomach clench, he was alone. The guards had moved to nearby tables, giving an illusion of privacy while maintaining their lethal vigilance. He looked up as she approached, and that same intensity hit her like a physical force. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I cannot. I am working. Sit, Vivian, softer this time but no less commanding. Please, the please undid her. She sat, perching on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to fly, the empty tray clutched against her chest like a shield. He cut into his lamb, the knife moving through the meat with surgical precision. Took a bite, chewed, swallowed, all while watching her with those storm gray eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone to the terrified thing underneath. You are afraid of me, he observed. No, she lied, his lips curved. Not quite a smile, but close. You are a terrible liar, Vivian Reed. It is refreshing. I should go. How long have you worked here? The question threw her. 8 months. And before that, why does it matter? Humor me. He took a sip of wine and she watched his throat work that single swallow, somehow more intimate than anything she had ever witnessed. I am curious about the girl who throws herself across tables to save my suit. I was in school. She admitted the words pulled from her against her will. Columbia. But I had to drop out after my dad got sick. Medical bills. She was saying too much, revealing too much. But something about his attention made her want to confess every secret she had ever held. Your father, dead 6 months ago. The words tasted like ash. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition maybe, or sympathy, though she doubted men like him did sympathy. And your mother. She left when I was 12. So it is just me now, just you. He repeated it, and the way he said it made it sound like both a tragedy and an opportunity. He set down his fork, folded his hands, those broad, dangerous hands, on the table. I would like to help you, Vivian. Warning bells screamed in her head. I do not need help. Everyone needs help. He reached into his jacket. Both guards tensed hands, moving toward concealed weapons before they realized he was just retrieving his wallet. He pulled out a business card, heavy stock, black with silver lettering, a phone number, nothing else. Call me when you realize that. I cannot. You can. He stood and she scrambled to her feet, her head barely reaching his shoulder. Up close, he was enormous. Not fat, but solid, built like men who understood violence intimately. And you will, Vivian Reed, because despite your terrible instincts for self-preservation, you are smart. Smart enough to know that opportunities like this do not come twice. He placed the card on the table between them. Then he did something that stopped her heart. He lifted her hand, the same wrist he had caught earlier, and pressed his lips to her pulse point. The kiss burned, brief, barely there, but she felt it in every nerve ending, felt it race through her bloodstream like poison or salvation. Until we meet again. He murmured against her skin, and then he was gone. The guards falling into formation around him, the restaurant parting before them like the Red Sea before Moses. Vivian stood there frozen, staring at the black card on the table, at the ghost of his touch on her wrist, at the half-eaten lamb that represented more protein than she had consumed in a week. Derek appeared at her elbow, his face purple with rage. What the hell did you say to him? He left a $5,000 tip, Vivian. $5,000 for a goddamn lamb chop. What did you? But she was not listening. She was staring at that card, at the promise and threat it represented, knowing with absolute certainty that picking it up would change everything. She picked it up. Outside, she heard the sound of a car engine. Powerful, expensive, the kind that purred rather than roared. She moved to the window just in time to see a black Mercedes with tinted windows pull away from the curb, flanked by 2 identical SUVs. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale and frightened, with a business card clutched in trembling fingers and a mark on her wrist that felt like a brand. She should throw it away, should forget this ever happened, go back to her invisible life, stay safe in poverty and anonymity. But that night, lying in her studio apartment, with the heat barely working and the neighbors screaming through paper-thin walls, she pulled out the card and stared at those silver numbers until they burned into her retinas. What kind of man kisses a stranger's wrist and leaves $5,000 for causing him no damage at all? What kind of man looks at a drowned rat of a waitress and sees something worth pursuing? And why, despite every survival instinct she had honed over 24 years of struggle, did she want so desperately to call that number and find out? She did not call. For 3 days, she carried that card in her apron pocket, felt it burning against her hip through every shift, every degrading interaction with customers who snapped their fingers at her like she was a trained dog. The numbers haunted her. When she closed her eyes, she saw them printed on the inside of her eyelids in silver that glowed like moonlight. Tuesday morning, her landlord knocked on the door at 6 in the morning, his fist pounding hard enough to rattle the cheap frame. She knew what he wanted before she opened it. Mr. Brennan had kind eyes once before his wife died, and the city hardened him into something sharp and mean. Rent is due, Vivian. 2 weeks late now. I know. I am sorry. I just need. He spat the word like it disgusted him. Everyone needs. I need too. I need 1,500 by Friday or you are out. I have 3 people waiting for this place. $1,500. She had 237 in her bank account. Her next paycheck would not come for another week. And even then, after taxes and the money she sent to pay down her father's medical debt, she would barely scrape together 800. The door closed in her face. She stood there in her threadbare pajamas, men's boxers, and a Columbia t-shirt she had kept from her old life, staring at nothing. The card felt like it was vibrating in her pocket. No, she would not. She could not. Men like Dominic Graves did not offer help without expecting something in return. And she had seen enough of the world to know how those transactions ended. Pretty Woman was a fairy tale. Reality was darker, uglier, paid in flesh and dignity. She went to work. Aurelian looked different in daylight, less magical, more mundane. The window she had pressed her palm against Friday night now showed every smudge, every fingerprint. Derek had her polishing silverware in the back. Punishment for whatever he thought she had done to earn that obscene tip. Tanya kept shooting her worried glances, but she did not ask questions. In their world, you did not ask questions about money that appeared like magic. Vivian, Derek's voice cut through the mindless rhythm of polish, cloth shine, repeat. Phone, says it is urgent. Her heart stopped. Nobody called her at work. Nobody called her anywhere. She had exactly 3 contacts in her phone. Derek, Tanya, and the hospital billing department. The phone was ancient, corded, hanging on the kitchen wall between health code violations. She picked it up with hands that had started shaking again. Hello, Miss Reed. The voice was professional, female, with a crisp British accent that suggested expensive education and even more expensive employers. Mr. Graves would like to extend an invitation for lunch today. 1 o'clock at Marisol. A car will collect you at 12:45. I am working. It has been arranged with your employer. The car will be outside Aurelian at 12:45. Please do not be late, Miss Reed. Mr. Graves values punctuality. The line went dead. She stood there, receiver humming with dial tone, while Derek stared at her with an expression caught between terror and calculation. What did you do? He whispered. Vivian, what the hell did you do? I do not know, she breathed. And it was the truth. At 12:45, she stood outside Aurelian in her only decent outfit. Black slacks she had bought for her father's funeral. A cream blouse with a small stain near the hem that she had tried to hide with strategic tucking. The November wind cut through the thin fabric, and she wrapped her arms around herself, wondering if she should run. She could run, could disappear into the subway, lose herself in the crowds, go back to her invisible life. The Mercedes appeared like it had materialized from smoke. Black, sleek, windows so dark they looked like portals to another dimension. It pulled up to the curb with barely a whisper, and the back door opened from inside. Sullivan sat in the driver's seat, his scarred face impassive. The passenger compartment was empty. Just cream leather and the lingering scent of that cologne that had haunted her dreams. Miss Reed, Sullivan's voice was surprisingly gentle. Mr. Graves is waiting. She got in. God help her. She got in. The interior was warm, temperature controlled, soft music playing from hidden speakers, something classical she did not recognize. A bottle of water sat in the cup holder. San Pellegrino, the same kind they served at Aurelian for $40. A note was propped against it written in strong, angular handwriting. Drink. You look at thirsty, Friday night. D. She picked up the bottle with trembling hands and drank. The bubbles burned her throat. She wondered if this was how Eve felt taking that first bite of apple. Marisol was not far. Everything in Manhattan happened within a few square miles, like the city was designed to keep the powerful close and the desperate closer. They pulled up to a restaurant she had walked past 100 times, never daring to even look in the windows. Michelin-starred, the kind of place where reservations required connections and cash in equal measure. Sullivan opened her door, offered his hand to help her out. His palm was calloused, scarred, a working man's hand despite the expensive suit. Third floor, private dining room. He is expecting you. The hostess took one look at Vivian and knew who she was there for. She led her through the main dining room, all white tablecloths, and hushed conversations to an elevator Vivian had not known existed. The third floor. She did not know restaurants had third floors. The elevator opened directly into a room that made her breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, the trees aflame with late autumn color. The space was intimate. One table already set with china so delicate it looked like it would shatter if you breathed wrong. And there, standing by the window with a phone pressed to his ear, was Dominic Graves. He looked different in daylight, harder somehow. The silver in his hair caught the sun. She could see the lines around his eyes that spoke of late nights and hard decisions. He wore a navy suit today, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone, revealing a triangle of tan skin. He turned as the elevator closed behind her, ending his call with a single word in Italian that sounded like a command. Those storm gray eyes found hers, and she watched something like satisfaction flicker across his face. Vivian. He said her name like it was something precious. You came. Did I have a choice? The words escaped before she could stop them. Sharp with the fear she had been swallowing since Friday. His smile was slow, dangerous. There is always a choice. You could have run, could have called the police, reported me for harassment, changed your number, moved apartments, disappeared into the city's cracks. He moved toward her, each step deliberate, predatory. But you did not. You got in the car, you came upstairs, you chose this Vivian Reed. I do not even know what this is. Then let me explain. He pulled out a chair, the one facing the view, of course, while he took the seat with his back to the wall, the position that let him see the door, the windows, every possible threat. Sit, eat, and listen. She sat because her legs would not hold her anymore. A waiter appeared from nowhere with plates of food she could not name. Crudo, something with citrus and olive oil that smelled like a Mediterranean coast she had never seen. Dominic watched her waiting until she picked up her fork with shaking hands and took a bite. It exploded on her tongue. Salt, acid, fat, all in perfect balance. She had forgotten food could taste like this, like something other than fuel to keep her body moving through the motions of survival. Your landlord, Dominic said, cutting into his own fish with precise movements, is threatening eviction. 1,500 by Friday. The fork clattered from her hand. How do you? I know everything about you, Vivian. He said it casually, like commenting on the weather. Your father was Thomas Reed, insurance adjuster, died of pancreatic cancer after a 6-month battle that bankrupted what little you had. Your mother is Rebecca Reed, now Martinez, currently living in Phoenix with her second husband and his 3 children. She sends you $50 every Christmas and does not call on your birthday. You dropped out of Columbia in your junior year, English literature major, 3.8 GPA. You owe $47,000 in student loans and another $32,000 in medical debt. Your apartment is 400 square feet, heat included but rarely working. In a building that should have been condemned 15 years ago, you eat 1 meal a day, usually whatever the kitchen at Aurelian is throwing out. You have not bought new clothes in 8 months. You walk 45 minutes to work because you cannot afford the subway. He paused, took a sip of wine. Did I miss anything? Horror washed over her in waves. You investigated me. Of course I did. I investigate everyone who interests me. And you, Vivian Reed, interest me very much. Why? It came out as a whisper. I am nobody. I am nothing. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Do not ever say that again. The words cracked like a whip and she flinched. He took a breath, visibly controlling himself. You threw yourself across a table to save a stranger's suit. Do you understand how rare that is? How extraordinary? In my world, people would push their own mothers in front of bullets for half of what I spend on dinner. But you risked your job, your dignity, for a man you did not know, expecting nothing in return. I just did not want to get fired. Another lie. He leaned forward and she could smell that cologne again, could see the flecks of darker gray in his irises. You did it because it is who you are. Selfless, reckless, but selfless. And that, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing her wrist where he had kissed it, where she could still feel the ghost of his lips. That is worth everything. She jerked her hand back. What do you want from me? I want to help you. Nobody helps for free, especially not men like you. Men like me. He smiled, and it was not kind. Say it, Vivian. Say what I am. Let us not pretend you do not know you are a criminal. The word hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Yes, no denial, no deflection. I am a criminal. I have killed people. I have hurt people. I have built an empire on blood and fear and the willingness to do things that would make you sick. But I am also a man who pays his debts. And you saved me from an inconvenience. That means I owe you. A $5,000 tip seems like enough. That was not payment. That was a gift. This he pulled a check from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. The amount made her vision blur. $50,000. This is payment. For what? Her voice was barely audible over the pounding of her heart. For your company, 3 months. You will live in one of my properties. Security provided. You will eat 3 meals a day. You will finish your degree. I have already spoken to Columbia about reinstatement. In exchange, you will accompany me to events when I require it. You will be seen with me. You will smile and look beautiful and make people believe that Dominic Graves is capable of attracting someone like you. Young, genuine, untouched by my world. You want to buy me, I want to employ you. There is a difference, is there? She stared at the check, at the number that could erase every problem she had, every debt. Every night she had cried herself to sleep, wondering how she would survive another day. What else? What else would you expect? His jaw tightened. Nothing you do not freely offer. I am not interested in unwilling partners, Vivian. When, if, you come to my bed, it will be because you want to be there. Not because you are paid, not because you owe me, because you want me the way I already want you. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implications she was not ready to examine. I do not even know you, then get to know me. 3 months. If at the end you want to walk away, you walk. The money is yours regardless. No strings, no obligations. I will have my lawyers draw up a contract. Everything in writing. Witnessed, notarized. You will have protection, Vivian. My protection. And in this city that is worth more than any check I could write. She looked out at Central Park. At the city, spreading beyond it like a glittering disease. Why me? She asked again because she still could not understand it. You could have anyone, models, actresses, women who would not humiliate you. You think you would humiliate me, he laughed, sharp and bitter. Vivian, you are the only genuine thing I have encountered in 15 years. Everyone else wants something. Power, money, connection. But you just wanted to keep your minimum wage job. That is, he trailed off, something vulnerable flickering across his face before his mask slammed back into place. That is worth every risk. The waiter appeared again, clearing plates she had barely touched, replacing them with something that smelled like heaven. Dominic gestured for her to eat. She did, mechanically, while her mind spun through scenarios and consequences. 3 months. She could survive 3 months of anything. She had survived worse. There is one more thing. His voice had gone cold. Businessman cold. You cannot tell anyone about our arrangement. Not your coworkers, not friends, not family. As far as the world is concerned, we met. We fell for each other. You moved in with me because you are young and impulsive and in love. Can you do that, Vivian? Can you lie convincingly? She thought about the lies she told herself every day, that she was fine, that she would survive, that someday things would get better. Yes, she whispered, I can lie. Good, He pulled out another card, this one white, with an address in Tribeca written in that same angular handwriting. Be there tomorrow at noon. Bring everything you want to keep. Everything else will be provided tomorrow. Her voice pitched high with panic. That is not enough time. It is plenty of time. Unless you are having second thoughts. Was she? This was insane. Dangerous. Every instinct screamed that she should run, should get as far from Dominic Graves as possible, should choose noble poverty over this gilded trap. But nobility did not pay rent. Instincts did not finish degrees or erase debt. And running just meant staying in the same place, slowly drowning in a city that did not care if she lived or died. She picked up the check. The paper felt heavy, weighted with more than ink and numbers. 3 months, she said, and then I am free. 3 months. He agreed, and then you are free, if that is what you still want. Something in his tone made her shiver, not fear exactly, but recognition. He did not believe she would leave, thought 3 months would be enough to trap her, to make her need whatever safety and security he offered enough to stay. He was probably right. I should go. She stood on legs that felt like water. I have to. There are things I need to. Sullivan will drive you home. Pack tonight. Sleep. Tomorrow your new life begins. He stood too, moving around the table with that predatory grace until he was close enough to touch. Vivian. His hand came up, cupping her jaw, thumb brushing her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. I will take care of you, I promise. No one will hurt you, no one will touch you. You will be safe. Safe, she repeated the word foreign in her mouth. When had she last felt safe? He bent slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His lips brushed her forehead, chaste, almost paternal, except for the way his breath stuttered when he touched her. Until tomorrow, Tesoro. The elevator doors closed on his face, on those gray eyes that promised salvation and damnation in equal measure, and she slumped against the wall, the check clutched in her shaking hand. What had she just agreed to? She did not sleep. How could she? She sat on her lumpy mattress, the same one she had dragged from a curb 3 years ago, stained and broken, but free, and stared at her life reduced to what she could carry. It fit in 2 garbage bags and a backpack. 24 years of existence, and she could move it all in a single trip. Except she would not be taking the subway anymore. At 11:45 the next morning, she stood on the curb outside her building. Former building. Mr. Brennan glared at her from his first-floor window. She had paid him the rent she owed in cash, bills she had gotten from the bank after depositing that impossible check. The teller had looked at her like she had robbed someone, had called her manager, had verified the funds 3 times before finally reluctantly giving her access to money she still could not quite believe was hers. The Mercedes appeared exactly at noon. Sullivan emerged, took her pathetic bags without comment or judgment, loaded them into the trunk with the same care he might use transporting anything precious or dangerous. She wondered which category she fell into now. Miss Reed. He opened the back door and she climbed in, leaving behind the only home she had known since her father died. The drive to Tribeca took 20 minutes through Manhattan traffic that parted before them. Like they were royalty, or like people recognized the car, knew what it meant, knew to get out of the way. They pulled up to a building she had walked past before, one of those converted warehouses with floor-to-ceiling windows and doormen in uniforms that cost more than her monthly salary. Had cost, past tense, because she did not have a salary anymore. She had an arrangement. Sullivan led her through a lobby that belonged in a museum, marble floors, modern art she did not understand, a massive flower arrangement that probably cost more than her rent had been. The doorman nodded to Sullivan with the respect men give to other dangerous men. They rode the elevator in silence to the top floor. The penthouse. Of course it was the penthouse. The doors opened directly into the apartment. No hallway, no neighbors, just sudden immersion into a space so enormous she actually gasped. Windows everywhere flooding the room with light. Exposed brick and polished concrete. Furniture that looked sculptural and uncomfortable. Art on the walls that she recognized from her art history classes at Columbia. Originals, not prints, casually displayed like posters in a dorm room. Mr. Graves will be here at 7. Sullivan set her bags down in the entrance. They looked obscene against the pristine floors. Garbage bags full of garbage in a palace. The bedroom is through there. Kitchen is fully stocked. If you need anything, there is a phone by the door. Press 1 for the concierge, 2 for security, 3 for Mr. Graves's office, and what number for escape? The words slipped out. Sharp with hysteria she had been swallowing since yesterday. Sullivan's scarred face softened, almost imperceptibly. There is no escape, Miss Reed. Not anymore. But if it is any consolation, this is the most beautiful prison in New York. He left, and she was alone. She walked through the apartment like a ghost haunting someone else's life. The bedroom was larger than her entire studio had been, dominated by a bed so big she could have fit 5 of herself across it. The sheets looked like they had never been slept in. Hotel crisp, blindingly white. A bathroom connected all marble and chrome with a shower that had 6 different heads in a tub deep enough to drown in. The closet was mostly empty, except for a note. Bergdorf's, tomorrow, 10 in the morning. D. She hung her 3 shirts and 2 pairs of jeans on hangers that probably cost more than the clothes themselves, and tried not to cry at how pathetic it all looked. Then she noticed the door, at the far end of the hallway, past the guest bathroom and what appeared to be a home office. A door that looked like all the others except for one detail. A lock. Not the standard bedroom lock. Something heavier. Industrial. The kind of lock you put on a door when you wanted to keep people out. Or keep something hidden. She should have left it alone. Should have respected the boundary, the privacy, the implicit warning. But Vivian Reed had never been good at leaving things alone. It was the same impulse that had sent her lunging across that table. The need to know. The refusal to look away. The lock was electronic. A keypad. She tried the obvious codes. 1234 0000. Nothing. She was about to give up when she noticed the scratch marks around the frame. Someone had forced this door before. Recently, the wood was fresh where it had splintered. She pushed. The door resisted, then gave. The room was small, a study maybe or what had once been one. But the desk had been pushed against the wall, the shelves cleared. In their place, a single chair faced the window, and on the wall above it, a photograph. Vivian's blood went cold. The woman in the photograph was young, early 20s, dark hair, wide eyes, a smile that seemed to hold a secret. She wore a white sundress and stood on what looked like a rooftop somewhere in the city, the skyline blazing behind her in summer light. She looked like Vivian. Not exactly, not a twin, but close enough to make Vivian's skin crawl. The same bone structure, the same dark hair, the same wide, trusting eyes that seemed to invite the world in without understanding what the world could do. Below the photograph on a small shelf sat a silver frame. Inside, a pressed flower, white, a lily, and beside it a name engraved on a small brass plate. Eleanor, 2017 to 2021. 4 years. This woman had been young when she died. 24 maybe. Vivian's age. Vivian stood in that room staring at the face of a dead woman who looked like her and felt the architecture of everything she had believed about this arrangement begin to crack. Dominic had not chosen her because she was genuine, not because she was selfless or brave or any of the pretty words he had used. He had chosen her because she looked like a ghost. She left the room, closed the door, sat on the enormous bed in the enormous bedroom, and wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. She should leave, should grab her garbage bags and walk out before Dominic arrived, before this went any further. But where would she go? Back to Mr. Brennan and the eviction notice. Back to the medical debt collectors. Back to eating kitchen scraps and walking 45 minutes in the cold. She had no good choices left, only less terrible ones. The afternoon crawled by. She tried to read, tried to watch television, tried to do anything that would stop her mind from circling back to that photograph, to those eyes that looked so much like her own, to the dates on that brass plate and the questions they raised. At exactly 7, she heard the elevator. Her heart kicked into overdrive. She stood, smoothed down her nicest shirt, the cream one, stained carefully hidden, and waited. Dominic stepped into the apartment, and the space that had felt enormous suddenly contracted around him. He wore the same navy suit from earlier, but he had loosened his tie and undone another button. She could see the exhaustion around his eyes. He looked like a man who had been making decisions all day and was tired of the weight of them. His eyes found hers, and something in his face eased. Vivian, just her name. But the way he said it made her feel like she was something good at the end of a bad day. You came, she said. I said I would. People say many things. They rarely follow through. He shrugged out of his jacket, draped it over a chair with the carelessness of someone who had a dozen identical ones. Have you eaten? I am not hungry. A lie. She was starving, but eating felt like accepting this, like admitting she was here by choice rather than necessity. His eyes narrowed. You have not eaten since yesterday at Marisol. Do not lie to me, Vivian. I will know. How? Because I see you. He moved closer and she forced herself not to retreat. Really see you the way you press your hand against your stomach when it growls, the way you look at food like you are calculating if you deserve it. You have been hungry so long you have forgotten what satisfaction feels like. Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back. I am fine. You are not. But you will be. He pulled out his phone. Type something. Dinner will be here in 30 minutes. Go change. There is something on your bed. I did not see look again. She went to the bedroom because arguing felt like more effort than she could manage. On the bed, laid out like an offering, was a dress. Simple. Black. But clearly expensive. The kind of expensive she could recognize even without checking the label. Beside it, shoes. Her size. How did he know her size? Because he knew everything. He had investigated her. He knew her measurements, her habits, her fears. He knew her better than she knew herself. And he knew about Eleanor. Knew that Vivian looked like a dead woman whose photograph he kept locked in a secret room. And he had said nothing. She changed because she did not know what else to do. The dress fit perfectly, skimming her body like it had been made for her. Maybe it had. The shoes were comfortable despite the heel. Leather so soft it felt like something she did not deserve. She looked at herself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back. She looked elegant, expensive, like she belonged here. She looked like a lie. She looked like Eleanor. When she returned to the living room, Dominic had changed too. Dark slacks, black shirt, no tie. Casual, but the kind of casual that cost thousands. He was setting the dining table, and the sight of him doing something so domestic was jarring enough to stop her mid-step. He looked up, saw her, and went completely still. The silence stretched between them, heavy with something she could not name. His eyes moved over her slowly, deliberately, and she felt that gaze like a physical touch. Felt it everywhere the dress touched her skin. Perfect, he breathed. You are perfect. Who is Eleanor? The words left her mouth before she could stop them, before she could calculate the risk, before she could decide whether knowing was worth whatever price the answer would extract. Dominic's face did not change. That was what terrified her most. The absolute stillness. The way his expression locked down like blast doors sealing shut over something explosive. The silence lasted 3 seconds. It felt like 3 years. Where did you hear that name? I found the room, the locked room. I saw the photograph. Something moved behind his eyes, something old and wounded and dangerous. He set down the plates he had been holding. Carefully, precisely, the way a man handles things when he wants to break them instead. Eleanor Ashford. He said the name like pressing on a bruise. She was someone I loved. 5 years ago, the Kesslers killed her. Natasha's brother, Victor, put a bullet in her head because he wanted to hurt me, and she was the softest target. Vivian's stomach dropped. She looks like me. I know. Is that why you chose me? Because I remind you of a dead woman. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw it. The grief that lived beneath the power and the violence and the expensive suits. The wound that had never healed. The reason a man who could have anyone had fixated on a broke waitress who had stumbled into his orbit. Yes, he said. At first, yes, you look like her, and it gutted me, and I wanted to understand why the universe would do something so cruel as to put her face on a stranger in a restaurant I should never have gone to. Vivian felt the floor tilt beneath her. She gripped the back of a chair. But that was the first 5 minutes, Vivian. That was the shock. What came after was you, the way you caught that picture, the way you apologized 17 times while soaked to the bone, the way you looked at me without wanting anything except to escape. You are not Eleanor. You are nothing like Eleanor. She was quiet and careful and afraid of everything. You are reckless and stubborn, and you break into locked rooms in the homes of dangerous men because you cannot stand not knowing the truth. He crossed to her, slow, giving her time to run. I should have told you. I know that. I should have told you before you agreed, before you came here. It was wrong to let you walk into this blind. And if you want to leave, if this changes everything, I will understand. The money is still yours. The offer stands. You can walk out right now and never see me again. She should walk out. Every rational thought in her head screamed it. He had lured her here under false pretenses, had wrapped his grief in a contract and called it an arrangement. She was a replacement, a stand-in for a ghost. But she looked at his face, at the rawness there, at the way his hands hung at his sides, open and empty, waiting for whatever she decided. And she realized something that frightened her more than any of the danger he represented. He was telling the truth. All of it. The ugly parts and the vulnerable parts and the parts that made him look weak instead of powerful. He had not tried to spin it or soften it or make himself the hero of Eleanor's story. He had simply said, here is what I am. Here is what I have done. Here is the worst thing about me. And then he had given her the choice. I am not leaving, she said. Not tonight, but you will tell me everything. About Eleanor, about the Kesslers, about what I have walked into. No more locked rooms, no more secrets. If I am going to be in this, I need to know exactly what this is. Something cracked open in his expression. Relief, gratitude, and underneath it, the first flicker of something that might have been hope. Okay, he said. Okay. Everything. They sat at the dining table. The food arrived and grew cold between them. And Dominic Graves told Vivian Reed the story of Eleanor Ashford, how they had met at an art gallery when he was 35, how she had been a painter, quiet and luminous and completely unequipped for the world he lived in, how he had loved her the way men like him loved, violently and completely, and with the constant terror that someone would take her away. How someone did. Victor Kessler, Natasha's younger brother, 28 years old, ambitious, and looking for the fastest way to wound the man who had killed his father. He had found Eleanor alone in her studio on a Tuesday afternoon, and he had ended her. Dominic had found the body, had held her while the warmth left, had buried her in a cemetery in Connecticut where the trees turned gold in autumn because she had always loved the fall. And then he had spent 5 years building the power and the alliances necessary to destroy the Kessler family piece by piece. Not a quick death, a slow dismemberment, taking their territory, turning their allies, choking their revenue until Victor was cornered and desperate. That is what you have walked into, Dominic said. A war that has been building for 5 years. Victor is desperate now, dangerous. And the moment he finds out about you, the moment he sees your face, he will think of Eleanor. And he will come for you the way he came for her. Then why bring me into this? Why put a target on someone who looks like the woman he already killed? Because I am selfish, his voice was raw. Because when I saw you, something inside me that had been dead for 5 years woke up. And I could not let that go. Even knowing the risk, even knowing what it might cost. The honesty of it cut her open. She sat there in her expensive dress in his expensive apartment, surrounded by art, worth millions and ghosts worth more, and understood for the first time exactly what she had gotten herself into. Not a fairy tale, not a transaction, a war, with her face at the center of it. She picked up her fork, took a bite of the cold food, chewed, swallowed. Then we had better make sure Victor does not get the chance. Dominic stared at her. And for the first time since she had met him, she saw surprise on his face. Genuine, unguarded surprise. You are not running. I have been running my entire life. She met his eyes, storm gray, full of everything he had just confessed. Running has never gotten me anywhere. Maybe it is time to try something different. He reached across the table, took her hand, and held it like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Outside, the November wind howled against the windows of the penthouse. Below them, Manhattan glittered like a promise or a threat. And Vivian Reed, who had been invisible her entire life, sat across from a man who saw her clearly, who had chosen her for the wrong reasons and stayed for the right ones, and decided that for the first time in 24 years, she would not look away from what frightened her. She would walk straight into it. The weeks that followed reshaped Vivian Reed in ways she had not anticipated. Not all at once, not with dramatic transformation or sudden clarity, but slowly the way water reshaped stone, the life she had agreed to, began carving new edges into the person she had been. Columbia reinstated her mid-semester. Dominic had pulled whatever strings necessary, and she did not ask what those strings were or who had been threatened to make it happen. She simply showed up to campus on a Monday morning with Sullivan waiting in the Mercedes at the curb and a backpack full of textbooks that someone had purchased and left on the kitchen counter. No note this time. Just the books she needed and a laptop so thin it looked like it might dissolve in her hands. She studied in the penthouse library, a room she had discovered behind the living area lined floor to ceiling with books that ranged from first edition Hemingway to dog-eared paperback thrillers. Dominic read voraciously. She learned this about him in pieces. The way she learned everything about him, in fragments and confessions dropped between bites of dinner. He had never gone to college, had been running his father's operation since 19 when he had put a bullet in the man who had put bruises on his mother for as long as Dominic could remember. He had educated himself the way desperate men do, through obsession, reading everything, remembering everything, building the intellectual framework to support the empire he was constructing from blood and calculation. He talked about art the way some men talked about God, with reverence and need and the suspicion that beauty was the only thing that could save him from what he had become. Vivian found herself studying him the way she studied her Victorian literature, looking for patterns, subtext, the story beneath the story. Then there was Renata Ferrante, wife of Luca who handled Boston, a woman built like a dancer but trained like a soldier. She appeared at the penthouse on Wednesday morning 3 days after Vivian moved in with a gym bag and an expression that suggested she had better things to do. "You are Dominic's new project." Renata said it without malice. Just observation. She looked Vivian up and down with the clinical assessment of someone who measured threats for a living. "You are too thin, too slow, and you hold your body like someone who expects to be hit but does not know how to hit back. I have never hit anyone." Then we start there. The private range in Queens smelled like gunpowder and concrete. Renata placed a handgun in Vivian's palm and closed her fingers around it. Vivian flinched. The metal was cold, heavier than she had expected. "This is a Glock 19. Renata's voice was patient, steady, the voice of a woman who had taught this lesson before and understood its weight. "It will not fire unless you pull the trigger. It will not judge you for holding it. It is a tool. Nothing more. It is a weapon. Tools are weapons. Weapons are tools. The distinction is intent. Now, plant your feet, square your shoulders, both hands, and breathe." The first shot nearly knocked Vivian off her feet. The recoil shocked up through her wrists and into her shoulders. The bullet hit somewhere in the general vicinity of the target. Maybe. Renata did not comment on accuracy. She simply adjusted Vivian's grip, repositioned her stance, and said again, "Breathe." By the end of the first session, Vivian's hands had stopped shaking when she held the gun. By the end of the second week, she could hit the center ring 3 times out of 5. By the end of the month, she could field strip the weapon clean, reassemble it, and put a round through the target's forehead at 15 yards. That should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like power, the first real power she had ever held. Renata taught her more than shooting, self-defense, how to break a grip, how to use her small mind as an advantage, how to recognize when a room had too many exits or not enough, how to spot a weapon concealed under clothing, how to move through a crowd without being predictable. "You are not learning to fight." Renata told her one afternoon while Vivian nursed bruised knuckles and a split lip she had earned by being too slow to dodge. "You are learning to survive long enough for someone to get to you. There is a difference. And if no one gets to me." Renata looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Then you survive anyway." Dominic noticed the changes. She saw it in his eyes when she came home from training, flushed and sore, moving differently than she had before. He did not comment, but his hand lingered on her waist. His eyes tracked the new confidence in her posture. And once when she reached for a glass on a high shelf and her shirt rode up, revealing the bruise on her ribs from a failed block, he went very still. "Who?" The word was quiet, controlled, but underneath it something volcanic. Renata. Vivian pulled her shirt down. Training, it is fine. It is not fine. It is the price of learning. She met his eyes. You should understand that better than anyone. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Once, and said nothing more. The gala arrived on a Saturday night in early December. The Metropolitan Museum of Art. Sullivan drove them in the Mercedes, now flanked by 2 additional SUVs, full of men whose eyes never stopped moving. Vivian sat beside Dominic in a midnight blue gown that had been waiting in the closet when she woke that morning. Backless, the kind of dress that required confidence she was still building. Diamonds cold against her throat. On loan, he had said, though, the way he had fastened them himself suggested something more permanent. You are shaking. His hand covered hers, warm and solid. I am not afraid. Another lie. She was terrified, not of him, but of what tonight represented. The moment she stepped out of this car on his arm, she stopped being Vivian Reed, invisible waitress. She became Vivian Reed, Dominic Graves' woman. And in his world, that title came with a target painted on her back. Listen to me. His voice dropped low. Stay close. Do not accept drinks from anyone but the waiters. Do not go anywhere alone. If you need the restroom, tell me and I will have someone escort you. Do not engage with anyone I do not introduce you to first. And if anything feels wrong, if anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. Understood. You make it sound like a war zone, his jaw tightened. It is, just a prettier one. The car stopped. Through the tinted windows she could see the red carpet, the photographers, the glittering crowd climbing the museum steps like pilgrims approaching a temple. Her stomach twisted. Vivian, he turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with unexpected tenderness. You are the most beautiful woman here tonight. Not because of the dress or the diamonds or anything I bought you, because of who you are underneath all of it. Remember that. And remember you are with me. That means you are untouchable. Then Sullivan opened the door and suddenly they were in it. The flash of cameras, the shouts of photographers, the crushing attention of 1,000 eyes. Dominic emerged first, buttoning his tuxedo jacket with practiced ease, and then extended his hand to her. She took it, stepped out into the glare, and the world exploded with light. Mr. Graves, who is your date? Dominic over here. Sir, can we get a name? Dominic's hand settled on the small of her bare back, scorching against her skin, guiding her up the steps with the confidence of a man who owned everything he touched. He did not answer the photographers, did not acknowledge their existence, but she felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, felt it dissecting her, judging, finding her wanting. Inside the museum had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, champagne flowing like water. Women dripped with jewels that could fund small countries. Men wore tuxedos that cost more than cars. And everyone was watching them. Dominic. A woman materialized from the crowd, all sharp angles and sharper eyes, her red dress clinging to a body maintained by personal trainers in surgical precision. I heard rumors you were bringing someone, but I had to see it to believe it. Natasha. Dominic's voice went cold. His hand tightened on Vivian's back. Still hunting for your next husband. Still pretending you are something other than your father's son. The air between them crackled with history, with violence barely leashed. Vivian stood there caught in the crossfire, feeling very small and very young. But she did not look away. Renata had taught her that. Do not look away. Do not give them the satisfaction. Vivian Reed, Dominic said, pulling her forward. Meet Natasha Kessler. Her father and mine had business together before he died. Tragically, the implication hung heavy. Before Dominic killed him, or had him killed. The distinction probably did not matter. Natasha's eyes moved over Vivian, dismissive, cruel. Then something shifted. Something cold and calculating entered her expression as she studied Vivian's face, her bone structure, her dark hair, and Vivian watched the recognition hit. Natasha knew who Vivian looked like, knew what that resemblance meant. How refreshing. Natasha's smile was a blade. You found yourself a replacement. Does she know she is wearing a dead girl's face? The words hit Vivian like a slap. Beside her, Dominic went rigid. The hand on her back turned to steel, and then he kissed her. It was not gentle. was not the careful, questioning touch she might have expected for show. His hand fisted in her carefully styled hair, tilting her head back, and his mouth claimed hers with the possessiveness of a man marking territory. She gasped against his lips, and he took advantage, deepening the kiss until she forgot where they were. Forgot Natasha watching with fury in her eyes. Forgot everything but the taste of him, whiskey and mint, and power. When he pulled back, she was dizzy, her lipstick ruined, her composure shattered. "Excuse us," he said to Natasha, his voice rough. "We have people to see." He led her away, his hand burning against her back. And she heard Natasha's laugh following them, bitter, knowing. Around them, conversation had paused, then resumed with increased intensity. Everyone had seen. Everyone knew. By tomorrow, her face would be everywhere. Speculation running wild about who she was and how she had caught the attention of one of New York's most dangerous men. "I am sorry." Dominic steered her toward a quieter corner. "I should not have done that. That was necessary." She surprised herself with the word, and with the truth of it. "Natasha knows. About Eleanor. About why I am here. That kiss told everyone I am yours before she could tell them I am a ghost." He stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "You are not a ghost, no." She straightened, adjusted the diamonds at her throat. "I am not." There was a man she needed to meet that evening. Luca Ferrante, Renata's husband. He handled the Boston territory, and he looked at Vivian with the kind of assessment that suggested he was measuring her not as a woman but as a variable in an equation. Younger than Dominic, maybe 35. Dark hair and darker eyes, and a scar running from his temple to his jaw that he wore like a medal. "Did not think you would make it." Luca nodded to Dominic with a gesture of respect she had not seen him give anyone else. Had to see if the rumors were true. Dominic Graves domesticated. She is prettier than the photograph. Luca's eyes found hers, assessing, but not unkind. "What photograph?" Vivian asked, then realized. Of course there were photographs. Dominic had investigated her. "The one from your Columbia ID. You looked miserable." Luca extended his hand. "Luca Ferrante. I handle the less glamorous side of things up in Boston." She shook his hand, noted the calluses, the way his fingers lingered just long enough to read her pulse. "Vivian Reed. I handle the terrified girlfriend role." He laughed, surprised and genuine. "She is funny. I like her. Try not to get her killed, Dominic. I am tired of attending funerals." "There will not be a funeral." But Dominic's hand tightened on her back. "Everyone knows she is under my protection now. Everyone knows. Does not mean everyone cares." Luca's expression sobered. "The Kesslers are making noise. Natasha's father might be dead, but her brother is not. And he has a long memory about who pulled the trigger. Let him remember. Let him try something. Are you ready for that?" Luca's eyes flicked to Vivian. "Because you have just painted a target on her back. Victor will not come at you directly. He is not stupid. But her. She is accessible. The perfect way to hurt you without risking open war." Ice flooded Vivian's veins. This was real. The danger Dominic had warned her about was not abstract. It was Victor Kessler and men like him. Men who would hurt her just to watch Dominic bleed. "No one touches her." Dominic's voice could have cut glass. "Anyone who tries answers to me, personally. Just be careful, brother. You are not thinking clearly, and that is when mistakes happen." Luca clapped Dominic on the shoulder, nodded to Vivian. "Nice meeting you, Vivian. Hope I see you again under less dramatic circumstances." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving them alone in a sea of people who wished them harm. Another man approached before they could regroup. Older, distinguished, silver hair, the kind of face that suggested authority and the comfort of wielding it. "Dominic, did not expect to see you here." Dominic's body went rigid. "Commissioner, I did not realize the police had started accepting invitations from men like Vincent Castellano." The commissioner smiled thinly. "Vincent has donated enough to the Children's Hospital to buy absolution for any number of sins, unlike some people who think they can simply intimidate their way into heaven. I am not interested in heaven, and you would do well to remember that." "Is that a threat?" "It is a fact. Now, if you will excuse us." He pulled Vivian away, his grip tight. Around them she felt the shift. People creating distance. recognizing danger when they saw it. The rest of the evening crawled by. Finally, mercifully, they left. The car was waiting, Sullivan holding the door open. Dominic practically pushed her inside. That night in the back seat, diamonds heavy at her throat, the dress suddenly suffocating, Vivian said what she had been thinking since Luca's warning. Natasha recognized me, which means Victor will know by morning that I exist, that I look like Eleanor. The silence in the car was suffocating. Dominic's hand found hers. Squeezed. Yes, he said quietly. He will know. Then we need to be ready. We. He looked at her, and she saw the war in his expression. The desire to lock her away where nothing could reach her, fighting against the recognition that she was not the kind of woman who would allow it. I am already in this, Dominic, whether I want to be or not. The moment Natasha saw my face, I became part of this war. So yes, we. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles, and said nothing for the rest of the drive. The days after the gala passed with a tension that hummed beneath everything. Vivian felt it in the way Sullivan checked the apartment twice before leaving her alone, in the extra security detail that appeared outside her classroom at Columbia, in the way Dominic came home later each night, his face drawn tight with whatever battles he was fighting in the world she was not allowed to see. She was studying in the library one evening 2 weeks after the gala when she heard his voice. He was in the office across the hall. The door was open a crack. She should not have listened. Should have put in her earbuds and gone back to her paper on the Bronte sisters. She listened. His voice was different. Not the warm, controlled voice he used with her. Not the cold, business-like voice he used on the phone. This was something else. Something that lived below both. Raw. Ancient. The voice of a man ordering death. I do not care what it costs. The words were low, measured, each one placed with the precision of a surgeon or a killer. He talked. He should not have talked. That is the rule. That has always been the rule. So you find him and you make an example. And you make sure the example is loud enough that the next man who thinks about opening his mouth remembers what silence costs. A pause, then, tell Luca, tonight, I want it done before morning. Vivian's blood froze. She sat in the leather chair with her book open on her lap and listened to the man she was falling in love with order someone's death with the casual efficiency of ordering dinner. She should have been horrified, should have felt the moral ground shift beneath her. And she did. But underneath the horror was something else. Something harder and more honest. She had known what he was from the beginning. He had told her, had looked her in the eye and said, I have killed people. She had accepted the words. Now she was accepting the reality. He found her there an hour later, still in the chair, the book unread. She looked up at him and saw the moment he understood that she had heard. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled taut. How much? She asked. He did not pretend to misunderstand. All of it. You ordered someone killed, yes. And you are not going to explain, not going to justify it, not going to tell me he was a bad man who deserved it. He crossed to the bar, poured whiskey, drank it standing his back to her. Would it matter if I did? No. She stood, crossed to him, took the glass from his hand. It would not. Because the next time it might be someone who does not deserve it, and I need to know if I can live with that. He looked at her. His eyes were storms. Can you? She thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the romantic version, not the movie version, where love conquered all and moral complexity dissolved in the face of passion. She thought about what it meant to love a man who killed, to share a bed with hands that had ended lives, to build a future on a foundation of blood. I do not know, she said, but I am still here, and I am not leaving tonight. Something broke open in his face. He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair, and held her like she was the last solid thing in a world that kept dissolving beneath his feet. That night, she did not go to the guest room. She went to his bed, their bed, and when he reached for her, tentative for the first time since she had known him, she reached back. He undressed her slowly, each revealed inch of skin receiving attention that bordered on worship. His hands trembled, and she realized with a shock that Dominic Graves, who ordered deaths without flinching, was nervous, afraid of this, of her, of what she could take away simply by choosing to leave. She pulled him down, covered his mouth with hers, and gave him the answer he was too proud to ask for. Afterward, in the darkness, with her head on his chest and his heart beating steady beneath her ear, he told her the rest. My father was a monster. His voice was hollow, the voice of a boy telling an old wound, not the voice of the man who had just spent hours orchestrating retribution. He beat my mother every day, methodically, like it was his job. Not in anger, not in drunken rages that could be explained away. He beat her the way other men balance checkbooks, with regularity, with attention to detail. She never fought back, never left. She was too afraid, too broken. By the time I was old enough to understand what was happening, she was already gone inside. Just a shell going through the motions of living. She cooked his meals. She ironed his shirts. She covered the bruises with makeup and long sleeves and smiled at the neighbors like everything was fine. And everyone let her. Everyone pretended not to see. Because my father was powerful. Because my father was useful. Because people believe that the violence they do not witness does not exist. Vivian pressed closer, listening, feeling his heartbeat beneath her cheek. Steady now, as if telling the truth had settled something in him. I was 19 when I killed him. He came home drunk, went after her with a belt. She was in the kitchen, making his dinner, and he hit her so hard she went down and did not get up immediately. Something in me just snapped. I had been waiting, for years, waiting for the courage or the rage or whatever it was that finally pushed me over the edge. I took the belt from his hand, and I used it. I beat him with his own belt until Sullivan pulled me off. Sullivan was just a kid then, 22, already working for my father. He pulled me off and looked at the body and said two words that changed everything. Now what? He exhaled, a long, slow breath that seemed to carry the weight of decades. My mother died 2 years later. Just stopped, like a clock winding down. The doctor said it was her heart, but I knew. She'd been dying for 20 years. My father just made it official. She never forgave me for killing him. That was the part I did not expect. She mourned him, wept at his funeral, wore black for a year, mourned the man who had systematically destroyed her for 2 decades. And she looked at me like I was the monster, because I had taken away the only structure her life had ever known, even if that structure was built on pain. Vivian felt her eyes burn, not with pity, with recognition. She knew what it meant to lose a parent and still feel abandoned by the one who remained. I inherited the empire he built, all of it, the territory, the men, the enemies. I was 19 years old with bug bunny on my hands and 1,000 people looking to me for orders. And I learned very quickly that the only way to survive was to be worse than the men trying to kill me. So I became worse. I became the thing my father had been training me to be my whole life without either of us knowing it. And Eleanor. Eleanor was the first time I thought maybe I could be something else. His hand stilled on her shoulder. She was light, pure, everything I was not. I thought if I could just protect her well enough, keep her separate from what I was, I could have both. The empire and the redemption. But Victor proved what I should have already known, that men like me do not get to keep beautiful things. They get destroyed, by us or by the people trying to hurt us. It does not matter which. She lifted her head, looked at him in the darkness. Then why try again? With me. Because I am selfish, and because you are not Eleanor. You do not need me to protect you from the world. You need me to stand beside you while you face it. There is a difference, and it is the difference that gives me hope. She kissed him, slow and deep, and felt the last wall between them dissolve like sugar in rain. 2 more weeks passed. The relationship deepened into something neither of them had names for. Vivian stopped thinking of the penthouse as his and started thinking of it as theirs. She cooked sometimes badly, and Dominic ate everything she made with a straight face that fooled no one. He left books on her nightstand, novels he thought she would like, with passages underlined and notes in the margins in his angular handwriting that revealed a mind far sharper than his lack of formal education suggested. She finished her midterms, 3 A's and a B+. Dominic said nothing when she told him, just pulled her into his arms and held her for a long time. They were happy, and happiness in Dominic's world was the most dangerous thing of all. The attack came on a Thursday, 2 in the morning. The sound that woke her was not a gunshot, it was glass. The floor-to-ceiling windows that she had pressed her palm against all those weeks ago dreaming of escape exploded inward with a sound like the world breaking apart. Dominic moved faster than physics should have allowed. One moment he was beside her in bed, the next he was on top of her, his body covering hers, shoving her to the floor between the bed and the wall. His hand found the gun he kept in the nightstand drawer, and he was firing before she had fully processed what was happening. The sound was enormous, deafening in the enclosed space. She pressed her face into the floor, tasting dust and terror, while the world above her erupted in vehemence. "Stay down." Dominic's voice was iron. "Do not move." More gunfire. From the living room, from the hallway. Sullivan's voice shouting commands in a tone that suggested he had done this many times before. Vivian crawled toward the bathroom. Training kicking in. Find cover. Stay low. Survive. A hand grabbed her ankle. Not Dominic, not Sullivan, a stranger. Black mask, black clothes, dead eyes visible through the opening in the fabric. He dragged her backward, and she screamed. Kicked. Remembered Renata's lessons, and twisted her body, bringing her heel up into his face with every ounce of force she could generate. Bone crunched. He howled. His grip loosened. She scrambled away, grabbing the nearest heavy object, a marble bookend, from the shelf by the bathroom door, and swung it at his head. Connected. He dropped. She stood over him, breathing hard, the bookends slick in her shaking hands, and realized she had just incapacitated a man who had come to kill her, or take her. The distinction did not matter. He was down. She was not. Dominic appeared in the doorway, gun raised. His face was a mask she had never seen before. Not anger, not fear. Something beyond both. Something that existed in the space where civilized men became what the darkness demanded. He saw the man on the floor, saw Vivian standing over him, and something in his expression cracked. "Are you hurt?" No, he crossed to her, pulled her against him with one arm, the gun still in his other hand, scanning the room with eyes that missed nothing. Behind them, the sounds of combat were fading. Sullivan's men had secured the apartment. "We need to go, now." More men appeared, not attackers, Dominic's people. They moved through the penthouse with military precision, checking corners, securing exits. Sullivan materialized, blood on his face from a cut above his eye, but functional. "3 of them," Sullivan reported. "2 down. One took the service elevator before we could lock it." Victor's men. The patches match. Kessler operation. Dominic's arm tightened around Vivian. His jaw was set in a way that promised violence of a scale she could not imagine. Then they moved through the service quarters, down a stairwell she did not know existed, into a garage beneath the building where a different car waited. Not the Mercedes, something armored, something that looked like it could survive a war. Dominic put her inside, Sullivan took the wheel, and they drove. The city fell away behind them. Manhattan first, then the suburbs, then the open highway cutting north through darkness. Vivian sat in the back seat with Dominic's arm locked around her and his heartbeat hammering against her ribs. She was still holding the marble bookend. She did not realize it until they were an hour outside the city and her fingers had gone numb. Dominic gently pried it from her grip, set it on the floor, wrapped both arms around her. "You fought." He said it quietly, against her hair. "You taught me to fight. Renata taught you. You gave me the reason." The safe house was in the Catskills. 2 hours of dark highway and silence before they turned onto a gravel road that wound up through bare December trees. The headlights caught the eyes of a deer at the tree line. Frozen. Watching. Then it bolted into the darkness like a lesson in survival. The house sat on a ridge overlooking a valley where the frost turned everything to silver in the pre-dawn light. Stone walls, small windows set deep like the eyes of something defensive. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, their breath coming in white clouds, rifles held with the casual readiness of men who had done this before and expected to do it again. Sullivan secured every room before allowing them inside. Checked closets, tested locks. "Clear," he said, and only then did he step aside to let Vivian pass. The interior was sparse, functional. A stone fireplace that someone had already lit the flames, casting moving shadows across walls bare of decoration. A kitchen stocked with canned goods and bottled water. Bedrooms that smelled of disuse and fresh linen. Not a home. A bunker disguised as one. Dominic guided her to the bedroom, sat her on the bed, knelt before her and removed her shoes, then her jacket, then checked her for injuries with hands that were gentle but thorough. The bruise on her hip was already darkening, purple spreading beneath the skin like an ink blot. He pressed his fingers against it, and she hissed, "I am fine." "You are not fine." He looked up at her from where he knelt, and his expression was something she had never seen. Guilt so dense it had its own gravity. "This is what I have done to you. You did not do this. Victor Kessler did this. Because of me. Because I brought you into my world. Because I was selfish enough to think I could keep you safe." She took his face in her hands, forced him to look at her. "Listen to me. I chose this. I got in the car. I stayed. I fell in love with you knowing exactly what you are. This is not your guilt to carry alone." He pressed his forehead against her knees, and she held him there, this powerful man reduced to something raw by the simple terror of almost losing her. She slept in fragments, woke to gunshot sounds that turned out to be tree branches cracking in the wind, woke to footsteps that were Sullivan making his rounds, woke to silence that was worse than any sound, because it reminded her of how alone they were on this mountain. When dawn came, she stood by the window and watched the sun pull itself over the ridge. The valley below was white with frost, beautiful in the way that empty, dangerous things are beautiful, the way Dominic was beautiful, the way their life together was beautiful if you did not look too closely at what held it up. She examined her hands. The right one was bruised across the knuckles from the bookend. The left had a scratch she did not remember getting. These hands had poured water and polished silverware and turned pages of Victorian novels. Now they had struck a man hard enough to knock him unconscious. She flexed her fingers, felt the ache, and realized something about herself that she had not known was there. She was not afraid. Not anymore. Not of Victor Kessler. Not of Dominic's world. Not of what it was turning her into. The fear had burned away sometime between the first gunshot and the moment she swung that bookend. What remained was something harder, colder, more useful. Dominic found her there as dawn broke fully, his phone finally silent after hours of calls. He looked exhausted, older, the weight of his world visible in every line of his face. His shirt was untucked, sleeves rolled to the elbows. The gun he had been carrying all night now absent from his waistband. He had set it down somewhere, a gesture of vulnerability that she understood without him having to explain it. He did not want to come to her armed. "It is done," he said quietly. "Victor's men are being dealt with. He will think twice before trying again. And if he does not think twice, then he will not think at all." His voice was flat, final. She turned from the window, looked at him. This man who killed people, who held her like she was sacred, who had covered her body with his own without hesitation when the bullets came. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited, patient, the way he always was with her. "When that man grabbed me when I fought back, I was not afraid." She paused, searching for the truth of it. "I was angry, and angry that someone dared touch me, angry that someone tried to take what was mine. My life, my choice, my future. I did not freeze. I did not scream and wait to be rescued. I fought, and part of me wanted to do more than fight. I wanted to win." She crossed to him, put her hands on his face, felt the stubble and the exhaustion and the violence barely contained beneath his skin. "I am not Eleanor. I will not be the soft target they used to hurt you. I will not sit in a studio and wait for someone to come for me. If Victor Kessler wants a war, then he has one. Not just with you, with me." Dominic closed his eyes, leaned into her touch, and when he opened them again, she saw something she had never seen in his expression before. Fear. Not of enemies or bullets or the endless chess game of power. Fear of her, of what she was becoming, of the woman his world was forging from the girl who had walked into Aurelian with trembling hands and an empty stomach. "That is what terrifies me most," he whispered. "Not that you will run, that you will stay, and become something you were never meant to be. Maybe this is exactly what I was meant to be." She kissed him, hard, with the taste of smoke and winter air, and the metallic edge of adrenaline that had not yet faded from her blood. "Maybe I just needed someone to show me." He kissed her back, and for a moment in that stone house on the mountain with armed men patrolling outside, and a war gathering momentum in the valley below, they were just two people holding each other in the early morning light. afraid, alive, and choosing each other despite every reason not to. 3 days in the Catskills. 3 days of firelight and silence, and the slow calibration of two people deciding what they were willing to lose for each other. Dominic worked constantly. Calls, messages, Sullivan coming and going with reports delivered in low voices that Vivian was not meant to hear. She heard them anyway. Victor Kessler had gone underground. The three men who attacked the penthouse were dead, two at the scene and one found in the East River the following morning. Commissioner Harlow had called twice fishing for information, playing both sides the way men in his position always did. And Natasha Kessler had been seen boarding a flight to London, running or regrouping. The distinction would matter later. Vivian used the time to think, to take apart everything she knew and examine the pieces like a student dissecting a text. She was good at this. It was what her literature degree had trained her for. Reading between lines, finding the story beneath the story, understanding what characters wanted versus what they said they wanted. She sat by the fire with a notebook she had found in a kitchen drawer and a pen that was almost out of ink. And she wrote down everything she knew about Victor Kessler. Everything Dominic had told her. Everything Luca had implied. Everything Natasha's eyes had revealed at the gala. Victor had killed Eleanor because she was soft, because she was the easiest way to wound Dominic. But Vivian was not soft, not anymore. And if Victor was going to come for her, she needed to understand him the way she understood a character in a novel. Motivation, backstory, the wound that drove the plot. Dominic found her on the third morning, cross-legged on the rug by the fire, notebook open, pages filled with her tight, careful handwriting. What is this? He picked up the notebook, read the first page. His expression shifted from curiosity to something harder. Research, she said. If Victor is the antagonist, I need to understand his arc. This is not a novel, Vivian. Everything is a novel. Everything has structure, motivation, consequence. You taught me that. Renata taught me to fight. But the most dangerous weapon I have is understanding how people work. And I understand it better than anyone in your organization. He stared at her, then sat down beside her on the rug. Read through her notes in silence. She had mapped out the Kessler family, what she knew of their operations, Victor's patterns, Natasha's role as public face and intelligence gatherer, the relationship between the Kessler organization and Commissioner Harlow, the vulnerabilities she could identify, the pressure points. This is good, he said finally, reluctantly, as if admitting it cost him something. I know, he almost smiled. The research is solid, but the conclusion is wrong. He tapped the last page. You think Victor will come at me through my business, through territory, through alliances. But Victor does not think like a businessman. He thinks like a wounded animal. He will come at me through feeling, through the thing I cannot replace. He looked at her, and she understood what he was not saying. Then we use that, she said. No, his voice went hard. We do not use you as bait. I am not suggesting bait. I am suggesting that I stop being the liability everyone thinks I am and start being an asset. You have soldiers and enforcers and people who kill for you. What you do not have is someone who can think the way Victor's victims think. Someone who understands what it means to be the person everyone else is trying to protect or destroy. I have been that person my entire life, Dominic. Let me use it. The argument lasted 2 hours. He paced. She sat. He raised his voice. She did not. He listed every reason it was impossible, dangerous, insane. She waited until he was done. Then she said one sentence that ended the discussion. Eleanor did not have a choice. I do. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. They returned to Manhattan on the fourth day, not to the penthouse. That was being repaired, the windows replaced, the bullet holes filled, the blood cleaned from the marble floors. Sullivan had arranged a temporary residence, a brownstone in the West Village with a security system that would have impressed the Pentagon, and a panic room hidden behind a bookshelf in the study. Vivian enrolled in her final semester at Columbia, attended classes with a security detail that kept discreet distance but never let her out of sight. She finished her paper on Victorian literature, got an A, received a note from her professor saying it was the most incisive analysis of Bronte's use of Gothic space she had read in 15 years. Gothic space. Vivian almost laughed. She was living in one. At night, she and Dominic fell into the rhythm they had built before the attack. Dinner together, conversation that danced around the edges of his world and hers. The careful, deliberate construction of something that felt, despite everything, like a home. But underneath the routine, she was working, building the case she had started in the Catskills, reaching out to sources she should not have known how to reach, using skills she had not known she possessed. The analytical mind that had earned her a 3.8 at Columbia turned out to be remarkably useful for mapping criminal networks and identifying the fractures within them. She found it on a Tuesday evening, buried in public records she had learned to access through the Columbia Law Library's databases. A connection so elegant it almost made her laugh. Commissioner Harlow was not just taking money from both sides. He was laundering it through a series of shell companies tied to a real estate development in the Bronx. The paper trail was complex but not invisible. Not to someone who had spent 3 years learning to trace themes through layers of subtext. And one of those shell companies was co-owned by a man named Victor Kessler. She showed Dominic that night, spread the documents across the dining table, the remains of their dinner pushed aside, and walked him through it step by step. He listened in silence, his face unreadable. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and looked at her with an expression she could not parse. "Where did you learn to do this?" "Columbia," she said. "English literature. You would be amazed how useful close reading is when applied to financial documents." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something she did not expect. He laughed. Not the bitter laugh she had heard before, not the performative laugh he used at social events. A real laugh, full and warm and surprised out of him by the sheer absurdity of a 24-year-old waitress turned literature student cracking open a money laundering operation that his own people had missed. "You are extraordinary," he said it with wonder. "I am thorough," she corrected. "Now, what do we do with this?" They planned. Together. Not Dominic dictating and Vivian accepting, but two minds working a problem from different angles. His knowledge of the underworld, her understanding of systems and patterns, his ability to identify threats, her ability to identify leverage. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would not go after Victor directly. That was what Victor expected, what Victor was prepared for. Instead, they would expose the connection between Harlow and Kessler, drop the documents to the right journalist, let the legal system do what Dominic's bullets could not, strip Victor of his protection, leave him exposed, and then only then would Dominic move. It was clean, bloodless, the kind of solution Vivian could live with. Except nothing in Dominic's world ever went according to plan. She left the brownstone on a Wednesday morning. Sullivan was with her. They were heading to campus for her last class before finals. The street was quiet, winter quiet, the kind of silence that settles over New York when the temperature drops below freezing and the city contracts into itself. The van appeared from nowhere, or from everywhere, blocking the street ahead, another behind. Sullivan reached for his weapon, but the men were already out, already moving, already on them with a speed and coordination that suggested military training. Sullivan went down. Not dead. She saw him moving, but stunned. A blow to the head that dropped him to the sidewalk. Hands grabbed her. 2 men, 3. She fought, kicked, screamed, remembered everything Renata had taught her and used it. Broke one man's nose with her palm, drove her elbow into another's solar plexus. But there were too many. They forced a hood over her head, zip-tied her wrists, threw her into the van. The door slammed. The engine roared, and Vivian Reed disappeared from the streets of Manhattan. Darkness. The hood smelled like diesel and sweat. Her wrists burned where the zip ties cut into skin. The van bounced over potholes. She counted turns. Left, right, right, left. Straight for a long time. Then stopping. She was pulled from the van, marched upstairs, through a door, down a hallway that smelled like mildew and old paint. And then the hood was ripped off, and she was standing in a room that might have been a warehouse office. Bare concrete, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a metal chair bolted to the floor, and sitting across from it in a leather chair that had been brought in specifically for this purpose was Victor Kessler. He was younger than she expected. 30, maybe 32. Handsome in the way that predators are handsome, all sharp angles and cold precision. His eyes were the same ice blue as his sister's. His scar, the one Luca had mentioned, ran from his temple to his jaw like a river on a map of violence. He wore a dark turtleneck and slacks casual as if kidnapping were a leisure activity. A glass of whiskey sat on the table beside him, half empty. The ice had not yet melted. He had not been waiting long. Two guards stood behind him, older, calmer. The kind of men who did not need to prove they were dangerous because everyone already knew. Sit, he gestured to the metal chair. His accent was faint, something that had been polished by expensive schools and sharpened by years of giving orders to men with guns. Please, we have much to discuss. She sat, not because he told her to, but because her legs were shaking and she needed to conserve energy for what came next. She forced her breathing to steady, forced her mind to focus, cataloged the room, one door behind her, two windows both boarded. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a frequency that suggested faulty wiring. The building was old, poorly maintained, not a stronghold, a temporary location, chosen for proximity, not security. She was not a victim. She was an asset. Dominic's word, Renata's training, her own intelligence. These were her weapons, and she would use every one of them. You look like her, Victor said. His voice was soft, almost gentle. The voice of a man examining a wound he had inflicted on someone else, not with regret, with fascination. Eleanor, you have her face, her hair, the same eyes. It is remarkable, really. The universe has a cruel sense of humor, or perhaps Dominic does, finding himself another version of the woman I took from him. I am not Eleanor. No, you are not. Eleanor was quiet, afraid. She begged. Did you know that? At the end, she begged me to let her go, said she would leave Dominic, leave the country, that she would do anything. He paused, his ice blue eyes studying Vivian's face for a reaction. She gave him nothing. Victor's lips curved in something that was not a smile. It did not change the outcome. It never does. The outcome was decided the moment Dominic chose to love her, the moment he gave me something to take. Rage, pure and blinding. It surged through her with a force that surprised even her. Not just for Eleanor. For every woman who had ever been reduced to a chess piece in a game between men. For her mother who had been reduced to a Christmas card and $50. For herself sitting in a metal chair with zip-tied wrists because a man she had never met wanted to hurt a man she loved. But she held the rage, contained it, let it harden into something useful, something sharp enough to cut with. What do you want? What I have always wanted. Dominic Graves on his knees, and you are going to help me. You are going to call him, tell him where you are, and he will come. Because men like Dominic cannot help themselves. They rush toward the things they love, even when they know it is a trap, especially when they know. And then what? And then I kill him. The way I should have killed him 5 years ago instead of taking the indirect approach. Eleanor was a message, you're the invitation. Vivian looked at him, studied him the way she had studied her notes by the fire in the Catskills. Read the lines of his face the way she read text, the subtext, the space between words. He was afraid, beneath the control and the cruelty. Victor Kessler was terrified. Of Dominic, of the empire Dominic had built while Victor hid and schemed. Of the fact that he had taken his best shot at the penthouse and Dominic had walked away. Victor was not a man executing a plan. He was a man running out of options, and desperate men made mistakes. Before I call anyone, she kept her voice steady, there is something you should know about Commissioner Harlow, about the shell companies, about the paper trail that connects your money laundering operation to his badge. Victor went still, his ice blue eyes narrowing. I found it, she continued, a literature student with access to public records and a talent for close reading. If I found it, how long do you think it will take a federal prosecutor? Dominic has the documents. Right now. If I do not check in within the hour, they go to the New York Times. Not to Dominic's contacts, not to his lawyers, to a journalist who has been trying to connect Harlow to organized crime for 3 years. She was bluffing. Partially. Dominic had the documents. The journalist was real. But the timed release was a fabrication. A story she was writing in real time, constructing a narrative that would buy her the minutes she needed. Victor studied her, his expression recalculating. You are bluffing, am I? She met his eyes, held them, did not look away, Renata's voice in her head. Do not look away. Do not give them the satisfaction. The question is whether you can afford to find out. While Victor considered while his attention was fixed on her face and the calculations behind it, she was working on the zip ties. Renata had taught her this too. Rotate the wrists, create friction, find the weak point. It would take time, but time was what she was buying. Victor stood, paced to the window, pulled out his phone and made a call in a German that she could not follow. His voice was sharp, urgent, the voice of a man whose plan had developed a complication he had not anticipated. She kept working the zip ties. The plastic bit into her skin. Blood made her wrists slick. She used the blood. Let it lubricate the narrow space between the tie and her flesh. Twisted, pulled, felt the plastic stretch. Victor ended his call, turned back to her. His expression had changed. The composure was cracking. She could see the fear leaking through. It does not matter, he said. Even if the documents exist, even if they reach the press, Harlow will bury it. He has been burying things for years. Harlow buries what is convenient to bury, she said. But a federal investigation is not a local problem. And once the Times runs the story, it is not Harlow's call anymore. It belongs to the public, to the prosecutors, to people who do not owe you or Dominic anything. The zip tie snapped. She kept her hands behind her back, did not let her expression change, felt the blood running down her fingers and pooling in her palms. Free. She was free, but she needed the right moment. Victor crossed to her, leaned down, his face close to hers, close enough that she could see the broken capillaries in his eyes, the sleeplessness, the desperation that lived beneath the expensive clothes and the careful cruelty. You are stalling, he said, waiting for him to come. He always comes for the women he loves. It is his weakness. No, she said. His weakness was that he tried to protect Eleanor by keeping her separate from his world, by keeping her ignorant, by keeping her soft. She brought her hands forward, grabbed the metal chair she was sitting in by its bolted legs, and drove upward with every ounce of strength Renata had built into her body over those weeks of training. The edge of the chair caught Victor under the jaw. His head snapped back. Blood erupted from his mouth where he had bitten through his own lip. He staggered. His guards reacted, reaching for weapons, but Vivian was already moving, already between them and the door. Already running, the guards shouted. Victor shouted something in German that sounded like every profanity in the language compressed into a single syllable. But Vivian was fast, faster than they expected, faster than a girl who had spent her life walking 45 minutes to work and running from nothing should have been. The hallway was long, bare, industrial. The concrete floor was cold against her feet. She had lost her shoes somewhere in the van. The pain did not register. Adrenaline had reduced her world to a tunnel. Run, survive, run. Two guards at the far end of the hallway turning toward the sound. She changed direction, found a stairwell through a fire door that groaned on rusted hinges. Took the stairs 3 at a time, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it echoing off the concrete walls. Her bloodied wrist left prints on the railing, a window on the landing between the second and first floors. She smashed it with her elbow. Renata's voice in her head clear as if the woman were standing beside her. Use the bone, not the fist. Rotate into it. Follow through. Glass shattered outward. Cold air rushed in. She was on the second floor of what looked like an abandoned industrial building somewhere in the outer boroughs. Below a fire escape with a ladder that ended 10 feet from the ground. Beyond that, a street. Cars, people, life. She climbed out. The metal of the fire escape was freezing against her bare feet and her bloody hands. Her fingers slipped. She caught herself. Descended. The ladder ended. She hung from the bottom rung for a moment, her arms screaming, and then she dropped. The impact jarred through her ankles and up into her knees. She rolled, stood, and ran. 2 blocks east, she found a bodega. Open, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk through a window covered in lottery advertisements and beer posters. The clerk was a heavy-set man with gray hair and reading glasses. He looked at her with the particular blankness of someone who had worked the night shift in New York for decades and had chosen long ago not to react to whatever walked through his door. She asked to use the phone. Her voice was steady, surprisingly steady. The adrenaline had not faded yet. It held her up like scaffolding around a building that was ready to collapse. He pointed to the counter, an old landline. She picked it up. Her fingers left red smears on the plastic. She did not call Dominic. She called Sullivan. The number was memorized. Renata had made her memorize it along with three others. Emergency contacts burned into her brain the way the numbers on Dominic's black card had once been burned into her retinas. Sullivan answered on the first ring, his voice tight with pain and fury, and something that sounded like relief so profound it was indistinguishable from grief. Miss Reed, I am alive. She gave him the address she had pieced together from street signs and landmarks on her run. I am at a bodega, corner of the block. I am not injured. Not seriously. 3 words. Do not move. 9 minutes later, the Mercedes appeared. Not Sullivan driving. Another man she recognized from the security detail. A quiet man named Barrett who never spoke unless spoken to, and who carried himself with the coiled readiness of former military. Sullivan was in the passenger seat, his head bandaged with what looked like a torn strip of shirt, his face a mask of controlled rage and professional shame. He had failed to protect her. In his world, that was unforgivable. And in the back seat, Dominic. He did not speak when she got in, did not ask questions, did not demand explanations or details or the name of every man who had touched her. He just pulled her against him so hard she felt his ribs compress against hers, felt the tremor running through his entire body, the violent, uncontrollable shaking of a man who had spent the last hour believing he was living through Eleanor again, believing that the universe had taken the second woman he loved the same way it had taken the first. She felt the moisture against her hair. It might have been tears, from a man who did not cry, from a man who had killed his own father and built an empire and ordered deaths without flinching. He was crying, silently, his face pressed into her hair, his arms locked around her like he could physically prevent the world from taking her away. They drove. Sullivan gave orders into his phone. Coordinates, instructions, the machinery of Dominic's empire mobilizing with terrifying speed. I got out, Vivian said into Dominic's chest, her voice muffled against the fabric of his shirt. I got out by myself. I know. His voice was raw, broken in places she had never heard before. Sullivan told me. He told me what you did, how you fought, how you bluffed him with the documents. She pulled back enough to look at his face. The devastation there was absolute. I almost lost you, he whispered, the way I lost Eleanor. And the difference, the only difference, is that Eleanor could not save herself, and you did. You saved yourself, Vivian, because you gave me the tools, because you let me train, because you did not keep me soft and separate and ignorant the way you kept her. The truth of it settled between them. Heavy, undeniable. He had loved Eleanor, and his love had been a cage. A beautiful protective cage that had left her defenseless when the walls finally failed. With Vivian, whether by accident or design or the simple force of her refusal to be caged, he had done something different. He had given her weapons instead of walls, and she had used them. Victor told me something, she said. He told me that Eleanor begged, that she offered to leave you, to do anything, and he killed her anyway. I know. He closed his eyes. The pain on his face was ancient. He also told me something he did not mean to tell me. He is desperate, Dominic. The attack on the penthouse was not strength. It was panic. He is losing control of his operation. Harlow is wavering. Natasha is in London because she does not trust her own brother anymore. Victor is alone. And alone men do not launch coordinated attacks. They make frantic, sloppy moves. And they leave evidence. Dominic opened his eyes, looked at her with something that might have been awe. The documents, she said. We release them now, tonight. Not to the Times, that takes too long. To every outlet simultaneously. Flood the zone, make it impossible for Harlow to contain. While Victor is still scrambling from losing me while his operation is exposed, you do what you need to do. She met his eyes, and what you need to do is your business, not mine. I do not need to know. The silence in the car lasted 10 seconds. Then Dominic reached for his phone. The next 12 hours unfolded with the precision of a military operation. The documents reached 6 newsrooms before midnight. By dawn, Commissioner Harlow's name was on every screen in New York. The connection between his badge and Victor Kessler's money was laid out in print with the kind of detail that made denial impossible. Federal investigators announced an inquiry by noon. Harlow was suspended by evening, his badge taken, his accounts frozen, 23 years of corruption undone by a paper trail that a literature student had followed to its source. And Victor Kessler stripped of his protection, his allies scattering like men who had suddenly remembered they had somewhere else to be, was found by Dominic's people in a storage facility in Queens. The same borough where Vivian had learned to shoot, where Renata had taught her that survival was not about strength, it was about refusing to stop. Vivian did not ask what happened in that storage facility. She did not need to. Some things belonged in the darkness, and she had made her peace with the darkness the moment she chose to stay. Natasha Kessler remained in London. Luca reported that she had liquidated her brother's remaining assets and purchased a flat in Kensington. She would not return. The Kessler name, which had once commanded fear across the eastern seaboard, would fade into the kind of history that people referenced in whispers and then forgot. The weeks that followed were quiet, the kind of quiet that settles after storms when the air smells like rain and the world seems cleaner than it was before. The brownstone in the West Village became their home in truth, not just in arrangement. The bullet-resistant windows were installed without fanfare. The panic room behind the bookshelf was stocked and tested and then mercifully ignored. Vivian finished her finals, 3 A's and an A-. Her professor wrote a note on her Victorian literature exam that said simply extraordinary work. She graduated from Columbia on a cold Saturday in February. The ceremony was held in a hall that smelled like floor polish and possibility. Sullivan stood at the back of the auditorium in a dark suit, his scar hidden by the shadow of the balcony, his eyes never stopping their sweep of the crowd. Dominic sat in the front row. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, his hands folded in his lap. And when Vivian's name was called and she crossed to the stage to receive her diploma, he stood, not to clap, not to cheer, just to stand, as if the moment demanded that he be on his feet. She caught his eye from the stage. Those storm gray eyes that had really seen her from the first moment in a restaurant where she had been invisible to everyone else. He did not smile. He did something better. He nodded. Once. The nod of a man acknowledging not what he had given her, but what she had earned for herself. The 3-month contract had expired 6 weeks earlier without either of them mentioning it. The check for $50,000 had long since been deposited. The debts paid, the medical bills settled, the student loans reduced to a number that no longer kept her awake at night. But the money had stopped mattering long before the contract ended. It had stopped mattering the night she heard him order a man's death and chose to stay. It was a Sunday morning in February when Dominic brought it up. They were in the kitchen. She was making coffee badly in the complicated machine she had finally learned to operate. He was reading the Times. Their names were not in it. The Harlow investigation was in its 5th week, and the coverage had moved from front page to business section. 3 months, he said, setting down the paper. We are past it, I know. She poured the coffee, handed him a cup, sat across from him at the table that still bore the scratch marks from the night she had spread her documents across it. He looked at her, and she saw the question before he asked it, saw the vulnerability he still carried like a scar, the fear that she would choose freedom over him, that she would walk away now that the contract was no longer binding. Marry me, he said. No, the word hit him like a bullet. She saw it impact, saw the flinch he could not control. Not no forever, she said quickly, reaching across the table, taking his hand. Not no to loving you, not no to being with you, no to the way you asked. He looked at her hand on his, then at her face. I do not understand. You said marry me the same way you say everything else. Like a command, like an order your soldiers would follow without question. But I am not your soldier, Dominic. I am not your employee. I am not the girl you hired to smile at galas and look beautiful on your arm. She squeezed his hand. I am the woman who mapped your enemy's financial network, who broke out of a kidnapping with a metal chair and a bluff, who chose you every single day knowing exactly what you are. And I will marry you, but on my terms, as your partner, as your equal, not as something you own or protect or keep in a beautiful prison. His jaw worked. She could see him fighting the instinct to push back, to assert the control that had kept him alive for 20 years. But he did not. He swallowed it, let it go. And when he spoke, his voice was different, softer. The voice of the boy who had protected his mother, not the man who had inherited an empire. What are your terms? I stay at Columbia. I am applying to the graduate program. I continue my work, my research, the analytical work that helped us take down Harlow. That becomes my role. Not decoration, not a pretty face at events, but a mind you trust. A partner who makes your operation smarter, cleaner, less dependent on violence and more dependent on intelligence. He stared at her, processing, and she continued. When we have disagreements, and we talk about them. You do not order me. You do not decide for me. You do not lock me in safe houses and make decisions about my life while I sleep. Anything else. One more thing. She stood, crossed to him, put her hands on his face the way she had that first morning in the Catskills. When this is over, when the wars are settled and the enemies are dealt with and whatever peace you can build is built, I want us to have something that is just ours, not the empire, not the organization, something small, something real, a life that belongs to us and not to the machine you run. He turned his head, pressed his lips to her palm, the same gesture he had made that first night at Aurelian, the kiss on her wrist that had started everything. Okay, he whispered. Okay. He pulled her into his lap, held her with arms that could have crushed her, but never would. And she rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat and felt for the second time in her life safe. But this time the safety was not a gift from a powerful man. It was something she had built, something she had earned, something she had fought for with a marble bookend and a metal chair and a mind that refused to be underestimated. The ring appeared 3 weeks later. Not a command, not a grand gesture, just a small velvet box left on her nightstand beside a note in that angular handwriting she had come to love. When you are ready, no rush, no pressure, just a question whenever you want to answer it. D. She opened the box. The diamond was not large, not ostentatious, not the kind of ring a man like Dominic could easily afford to display. It was simple, elegant, a solitaire on a platinum band, the kind of ring a man chose when he was thinking about the woman who would wear it rather than the impression it would make. She put it on. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He knew her measurements. He knew everything. But this time that knowledge did not feel like surveillance. It felt like attention, like the careful, deliberate noticing of a man who had learned slowly and painfully the difference between owning someone and loving them. She walked into the kitchen where he was making breakfast. Actual breakfast. He had learned to cook since the brownstone. Simple things, eggs, toast, coffee that was better than hers, which was not difficult. He looked up as she entered. His eyes went to her hand, to the ring on her finger. He did not smile. He did something better. He exhaled, a long, slow breath, like a man who had been holding it for months, for years, for the entirety of a life spent waiting for something he was not sure he deserved. She crossed to him, kissed him, soft and sure and steady. Yes, she said. My answer is yes. He pulled her close, held her. And in the kitchen of a brownstone in the West Village with February light streaming through windows that were not bulletproof but should have been, with the smell of burnt toast and good coffee and the cologne she would always associate with danger and salvation in equal measure, Vivian Reed chose her life. Not the life she had imagined, not the life she had planned, not the safe, small, invisible life she had been taught to want. Something bigger, something brighter, something that burned. That afternoon, she stood by the window of the brownstone, looking out at the city. Manhattan in February, gray and cold and relentless. The same city that had ground her down for 24 years. The same streets she had walked with empty pockets and an empty stomach. The same skyline she had pressed her palm against through the windows of Aurelian, watching raindrops race downward, each one, a tiny escape she thought she would never have. She was not that girl anymore. Not the invisible waitress. Not the scholarship kid. Not the daughter abandoned by one parent and orphaned by the other. Not the terrified woman who had gotten into a black Mercedes because she had no better options. She was Vivian Reed, Columbia graduate, the woman who had cracked a money laundering network with a literature degree, who had fought her way out of a kidnapping with nothing but training and nerve, who had looked into the eyes of a man who killed people and saw something worth saving, who had been seen, truly seen, for the first time in her life and had not looked away. Dominic came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. Together they watched the city move below them, all those people living their lives, fighting their battles, making their choices. She had made hers, and she would make it again tomorrow, and every day after that, not because she had no choice, but because she had all the choices in the world, and this one, this impossible, dangerous, beautiful choice, was the one that made her feel alive.